I'll put my opinion out there, and I'm curious too, because I know he and Amani are much younger than us old folk here.
Geriatric.
As far as just relating it to the concept of marriage, well, I'll just say my opinion and I'll kind of follow through with the question. I know for me personally, there was a time in which I thought I wanted to, but only because that was instilled in me growing up in the church a lot since as far as I can remember.
In the womb.
I never went through that whole purity ring ritual thing with the daughter and the father. My sister did. So that whole ring ceremony that you commit yourself. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You commit yourself to your dad until you're ready to be married and you save your virginity and yada, yada,
Well,
yada.
he's your owner. He's going to sell you to your husband. So,
that worked out because she was not a virgin. Anyways.
Neither was my sister. She was throwing it down. I was like,
the concept of being fed that and thinking that was something I wanted because I was told that was supposed to be for me because this is the only way that. Silly. We saw you, babe. We saw you. Obviously, my sister's wedding was drop dead amazing. Everything was perfect. She looked gorgeous, big ass gown, all the hoopla, all the money. But it was literally through her, from her telling me the day after. And like I said, it's barely been 2 years where their marriage is very lacking. It's tumultuous. He's like I said, he's a truck driver, so he's gone 2-3 months at a time, and he doesn't even necessarily have to be. I'm not going to get all in all the tea.
Girl, you better put that pot on the oven or the top of the stovetop. Boil that pot. Put the tea bag in the mug. Steep that shit.
No, kidding.
Steep this fucking steep tea.
And it wasn't until maybe my early mid-20s that I realized trying to kind of identify what I really wanted for myself. Like I knew I was a career education person. So it was obviously jumping from school to thing. I remember in my teenage years thinking, okay, I'm going to get married at 25. And then before I'm 30, I'm going to have my first kid. And me and my husband are going to be at least like 2 or 3 years by ourselves within the marriage before I'm 30 and have our first baby. I'm 32. None of that shit happened. None of that happened. Okay. Because you got to put a timeline on your ovaries because by 35, you better be careful.
You ain't the one that put the timeline on it. That was
my mom put a timeline on her. I remember her being 5 years old. And Monty, do you remember that? Like, what do you do? I have to go to school, get married, have baby, or what was? Do you remember?
No, it was that. It was graduate high school, go to college, get your degree, get the job, like make sure your career is flourishing. Then you get the man, and then you get the house and everything.
That's get the house.
Oh no,
first.
you don't get the house. The man's supposed to have the house ready for you.
Oh, that's right. My bad.
That was mine.
You move into his house after he buys you from your daddy.
That's so funny because my sister
you want your name on
the
that
guy.
house.
So sorry, I know I was long-winded, but I'll be brief. My overall point is that my idea of marriage, children, whatever, changed once I removed myself from religion, 1, and 2, kind of really evaluate what was realistic in modern days now for me. I remember my sister talking about weddings for like 6 to 8 years before they even got married, just looking up shit on Pinterest and showing me. I'm like, that looks so boring and expensive.
Who cares about that?
Like $100,000 for this bullshit. What? Like, it was just too ridiculous for one huge day for it to be like, you never know what the fuck is gonna happen. I'm sorry,
that's true.
So,
are we permitted to curse? Or
yes.
I already broke the rules.
Yeah, I'm totally unmonetized.
Right fine. Before I dropped
got a potty mouth. I already know. But overall point is, I think it's very obviously subjective, individualistic. I don't think there's no right or wrong way to go about one's life. The whole sex before marriage, or you're not supposed to have a baby before marriage. It's too much for me to care about someone else's life that's not mine. But overall, my question to Ki and Amani, as far as your own personal perspectives, as far as what you want for yourselves, ideally, what do you see for yourself?
Hey, something I can finally contribute to. So ever since I was younger, I never really cared for marriage or anything. And that was heavily reinforced when I got out the Christianity stuff, because I was thinking, it's like, what's really the point? You don't really gain much other than like the happy day, which from what I heard, the men doesn't really care about. It's mostly for the women. And
that's true. And even as the masculine presenting, on my side, as a masculine presenting, I don't care. That's on her. So,
Nikki,
I'm with you.
It's gonna be a big day. I know it's gonna be a big day for like her, but like for me personally, I really never cared that much for like marriage or anything. Like I just want the relationship. I mean, I don't really see any benefits from coming with marriage. Like sure, a ring, the big day, and then what after that? I would always, if I were to get married, I'd have to sign a prenup because you don't know what's gonna happen 10 years in the future, heck, a year or maybe a couple. I've seen people break up like on their honeymoon. And we want to get a divorce then. And then like both parties have to agree on the divorce and everything. It's just like people get stuck in this marriage for like months, maybe a year, and it's just like that's too much hassle. Like I just want to, like it may sound like a commitment issue, but I just want to be in a relationship. And if I don't like it, I want to bounce. And like not have to deal with like the repercussions of like all of this stuff, you know, because if it doesn't work out, I shouldn't have to be tied to it.
That's fair. Moni?
I would say struggle, but I don't feel like that's the correct wording, but I'll use it as a substitute. Struggle with the idea overall of marriage. I agree with what was said earlier, that when you're under a Christian umbrella, like you have these ideals that of course I'm going to get married and this and this. And I think as we broke away from that and I started focusing on finding myself, the idea of marriage doesn't seem realistic to me. Like I saw an article the other day where it was like studies show that people who marry younger have like more success at marriage. And that
younger?
Yeah.
Or older?
No, younger, and have less partners.
Interesting.
Have more success in marriage.
That's actually interesting. Yeah.
It would be amazing. Because usually studies showed that older, like people who were getting married in their 30s were having longer marriages than people who married at like 18 to 22, I think.
I didn't read the article, I saw the headline. So, but it said something like that. And it's kind of wild to me, the concept of feel like an understanding that you're going to be with this person for the rest of your life and not even the thought of how to make it work. I'm definitely a firm believer in people are in your life for seasons. So to expect to still
I like how you said that.
Yeah, but to expect to still be with that person from 20 to 80 is just not realistic to me. Even 30 to 80 or 40 to 80, like it just doesn't seem realistic to me. I feel like as humans, we force ourselves to do it because we've come to this belief that this is what's supposed to happen.
Yeah, society, religion blended.
Yeah, and I honestly don't feel like that's what's supposed to happen. I would prefer if as a society we would come together and acknowledge the fact that who you are at 20 is not who you're going to be at 30, is not who you're going to be at 40, is not who you're going to be at 50. So if you as a person are expected to grow and change, why would you think that your interests won't? I do applaud people like Will and Jada, for example, who've been getting married the past few years. But
I can't believe they're still married. I didn't think it would happen.
Well, Will said he's not going to get divorced, but I don't know.
Their episode of Red Table Talk, and when they were talking about their marriage, and it was,
when he was crying,
admirable, in my opinion, that they sat down and they figured out a way to get through life together.
Yeah, sustain together.
And not saying that that's the marriage that I would want, but saying that
let's figure out how we're going to get through this.
You made vows, you said for better or for worse.
You did.
And they took them seriously. And they said, we said that we were going to figure this out and that's what we're going to do. There's,
hey, they're still doing it.
Yeah, I have a certain level of respect for that because obviously not everybody's doing that. People are quick to jump to divorce or to be like, I don't want to deal with you. And I feel like there's growth opportunity in figuring out how to work with someone where it's no longer working. So in that aspect, if you can figure it out, I think that's respectable. So to the people that have been married 20 plus years, 10 plus years, however, that you figured out a way to manage, so to speak, with this person, in my opinion, is admirable because my patience isn't there quite yet. On the other hand, I just don't feel like it's realistic. And I almost wonder if you're forcing yourself through something that's unnecessary. Like if there's no longer, in using that same example where they've been together 20 plus years or something like that, are you still growing together or are you growing apart and you're forcing yourselves together? And I feel like that also should be a big focus.
I am so jealous. I wish I figured it out at your age. Shit.
I actually have some an interesting, I guess, response. So I think what marriage has become in our society currently is kind of a double-edged sword. Dr. Robert Sapolsky, who is a professor at the University of Stanford and a primatologist and human ethologist, states that humans are serially monogamous. Typically, we mate with a partner for as long as it takes for a child to pretty much not necessarily become self-sufficient, but to the point where you can mate again. And that's usually around 4 to 5 years. However, due to our forebrain advancement development and frontal lobe advantage over other species. And the recognition that we have that communal, going back to Maya's point regarding the benefits of raising a kid with multi-generational family members, that provides more stability long-term in a commerce-driven environment, which is what happened when we came down from came down from the trees, and then following that, moved from hunter-gatherer to a more agrarian-dominated environment. Which brings me to my second point. I was reading a book regarding millionaires and people who had been millionaires, mostly men, and what contributed to their success. And the millionaires who had been successful long-term had longer marriages. And that's because the contribution of another party's support reinforces the ability to pursue the tasks necessary to attain millionaire status. I like the commercials or whatever when I see like old people holding hands. I'm like, when I hear people have been married, I know it is adorable. When I hear people who've been married for 60 years, I envy that because, as Amani said with Will and Jada, despite the public spectacle, I do respect their ability to work their shit because a lot of people are quick to jump to divorce. Additionally, I find that after a certain age, like 30, 35, 40, being a fuckboy or fuck girl, it gets exhausting. You want to go home. You want to have someone who is, hopefully there. And that goes back to Key's point regarding the prenup. You don't know what the future holds. So you want to have some type of legal preventions in place and that's something you guys are going to have to discuss. And it's going to be a contentious conversation, undoubtedly, or hopefully not. But I think that there's value in a long-term solid relationship, not just because you guys can build wealth together and it's easier to build wealth with a partner, which is why the African American community has less wealth than other demographics, is because more than likely it's just the mothers who are raising the kids, which it's hard to raise a child and pay for all the bills. It takes from $300,000 to $500,000 to raise a kid today. So that's really hard.
Yeah, last time it was closer to $1 million.
So case in point, it's hard to do that. So it's easier to have someone to support you and help you, and in the interest of not being so long-winded. Well, Amani made 2 points really, like there's difficulty in seeing the benefit of being married long-term, but for those who can stick it out, there's an element of respect there and some consistency. But it would be nice to grow old and then, they are standing next to your deathbed with you with all your kids and grandkids, and there's all this land.
You can still do that with or without marriage.
You can, but there's also kind of going back to the social manipulation that occurred when we moved to an agrarian society. There are government and legal benefits to being married, especially for me.
Yeah.
Right. And especially for me being a lesbian woman, it's really hard to just tell someone, well, this is just my partner. If I say, and hopefully this remains legal, this is my wife, it carries a different weight to it. I think with heterosexual couples, they might have more flexibility and privilege in that area. But for me, I definitely want to have that legal cushion to fall back on.
And I totally, from that perspective, I absolutely understand that. And I get that.
Yeah, it's rough. But I think socially it is an institution, especially religiously, that we've been forced to accept. But long term, I see the benefits of monogamy. Even if you aren't necessarily monogamous, and maybe there's an understanding that, you can throw that ass in a circle for a few people, as long as I know who they are and you go to the doctor, we work through it. Because, to Amani's point, it really isn't within human nature or Homo sapien nature to be monogamous long-term. It's just not. But there are
actually a lot of scientific data coming out where none of the other great apes, I believe, are.
It's not something we can help.
Make sure you're not lying to anybody and that you're being safe. But going back to your point, you were talking about abortions in the Black community.
Yes.
For me, I think it's more socioeconomic. Again, Black having been redlined into together, and then have those communities stripped of the resources. Certainly the schools. We don't have the education that we all know that, one needs to have to be able to make choices concerning family planning. Also, we don't tend to have medical coverage, which makes it really hard to get contraception or birth control. And especially if you're like a Black family. And I say this to forced birthers all the time. It's like fathers are making these decisions too.
Yes, they are.
If you're barely scraping by with 2 kids, it's a hard choice to make, but 3 may not be viable for the family at that time. Fathers are weighing in.
Or weighing out.
Sometimes.
They do that a lot.
From what I've seen, it's not that women, we all know those girls, but generally women don't want to have an abortion or they're not callous about having it. It is a difficult decision that they're making to be able to support the rest of their family. I always advocate for healthcare for all, living wages.
It is a healthcare right, or it should be.
I agree with that, but America's so capitalist. If you need it, we're charging for it.
Not even so much that. It's that, I'm sure capitalism has a factor, but it's more aggressively this whole, that seed as a person done deal, or it's always some type of. I'm always related to some religious backing. I'm sorry, I'm just gonna go there. But
I mean, it is a religious stance. Like,
it is.
Non-religious people aren't fighting this fight,
right? And then to the level of cruelty that you can't even in certain states allow for a person to have that abortion because of a rape situation. That's a problem. Yeah. Or like even Texas, it doesn't even have to be that kind of cruelty. It can be where it's at the very detriment of the mother itself. Like if you have this, you're either going to have some serious health complications for the rest of your life, or you could potentially die.
And it's really interesting. Like the states that are the hardest on abortion also have stand your ground laws.
I know, from Florida. It's so interesting. And someone actually brought that up on my show with Matt's show, when I was on Matt's show last week. I can't remember the formal name for the laws, but they were talking about whether or not that was always justified. I think so. Come on my land, you try to threaten my wife and my kids. If you're not deterred by hearing that sound, then you'll be deterred by the blast. So I'm with that. But I have this very interesting perspective when it comes to not abortion, but the concept of what a baby is. I am 100%. So I actually made a video on my channel about this very issue, and it's mind blowing to me how not just men, but women in general. Because my mother's she's a single issue voter, and her issue is abortion. Like this woman has been picketing. Abortion. It's always abortion, and I mean, it's just weird to me. Like she's been volunteering, whatever.
The issue is never healthcare for all.
It's never that. No, because I don't think that's as much of an emotionally stimulating issue.
It should be that.
So I don't think anybody has a right to tell anybody what to do with their baby. And the example I've used, because I was reading the book The Faith Instinct by Nicholas Wade, and he was talking about child rearing practices of hunter-gatherer tribes. And I don't think there are any left in Africa, but the Kung tribe was the most recent. And I don't know if they're still around, but twins, if a woman had twins, one of the twins was killed because as a nomadic tribe, well, I mean, who's dragging two babies through the desert? Like it's
I hear you. I mean, just like,
but like, are we? I mean, well, I mean, so this is a very similar concept to other animals such as the shoebill, or even polar bears or lions. They have two children. If one is too weak, they get left behind and eaten. Yeah. And we are animals, and our lives, I mean, we have healthcare. We live in mine's not that nice, but we live in apartments and houses and places where we can hunker down. But for them, they see the difficulty and the difficulty in dragging another kid around the desert. I mean, that's hard to do. Yeah. I don't want to go outside. I don't even I used to work for the Boys and Girls Club. I was like, it's too hot. We're not going to be outside. We're not doing that. We're going inside. Take the children inside. But they don't have that privilege. So I think it's not our place to tell them. I mean, it's a harsh reality, right? But it's not our place to tell them. Not. It's just not.
They need to sustain.
Right.
And
I got distracted by chat because this is a very interesting, and I will take this person for their word as it being an honest question. Instead of birth control or drug birth control, why don't women avoid their ovulation period? Is it just not that easy?
No. Is this a male who asked that shit? Because it's got to be a male.
No.
How do you avoid your? That's something that my body tells me to do. How do you? Stop it.
Ovulation, besides the whole purpose of pregnancy or whatnot, it's actual a normal functioning hormone type thing, like testosterone is for men.
It's actually designed to attract males. Interestingly enough, too, exactly, and also our bodies change morphologically as well. Like our cheeks become more full and redder.
We need to shed that lining in our uterus. Sorry, I'm getting graphic.
Well, that's the period. Okay, so interestingly enough, when it comes to some primates and other species, females have evolved the ability to regulate their ovulation in order to make it appear to other males. Because in other species that are alpha male dominant, like chimpanzees, gorillas, lions, if a female is pregnant when an alpha male is overtaken, the other male will try to destroy kill the baby, force an abortion through increased stress. Or when she gives birth, that male will kill that baby because he's not going to share the resources with a child that's not his. So some females, I can't determine or remember which species, but Dr. Robert Sapolsky, Stanford, he's a genius. They've developed an evolutionary ability to mask pregnancy by forcing ovulation despite being pregnant. And for those who don't know, homeboy probably, that when women are pregnant, they don't have periods because they're not shedding eggs because they already got one egg that they're cooking or scrambling. But some species have developed the ability to give off the traits or basic indications of ovulation to protect that offspring from the new male who has taken over. So while they've evolved, well, to your point, they've evolved that ability. Homo sapien females have not. So no, we cannot stop ovulating.
Right. And also to that.
So what I'm also wondering real quick is this person talking about the rhythm method? Are you guys familiar with that? It's really
Just
big
do
with
like a pull-out
Catholics.
method. If not.
No, I mean,
That kind of like tracking.
it's tracking
Amani like that.
when
Thought it
you
was funny.
are. It's tracking when you're ovulating, when you're fertile. And having sex during that time.
Yeah, those apps. We had I think my ex still gets those. No, he said turn those emails off. I don't need to know when you're ovulating. Yes.
Well, and that brings me to my point. If Aunt Jeremy, that person that asked that question, meant tracking the ovulation, that's still not the best effective way, because abnormal periods are a thing.
Yes,
abnormal periods are normal. Too. Or more or less, I won't say like definitively it's supposed to be normal, but more women have those abnormal periods, which in turn
yes, it can convolute the
push out the time where you're supposed to have that ovulation.
According to Google, between 21 and 28 days.
Yeah, anyway, every woman's different.
I'm noticing mine as I'm aging. I'm starting to like drip into this. Key, you're gonna be all right. I'm starting. I noticed his face. He's like, my mama's like, I'm Mama, why? Mama, why you got an IUD?
I cannot contribute to this at all.
My mama does not have sex. Why would you need an IUD, mama?
Yes, Key, please contribute.
I got so much to say about periods.
I want to know if
about periods. Do you have any period questions?
Is your woman on an IUD? Is your woman using an IUD?
Oh, I do not have a woman right now.
Oh, well, when you get one, will you encourage her to use an IUD?
I gotta look up what that is again. It's that little Y thing, right?
It's the thing you put
in there.
I'm shocked.
Yeah, it's shaped like a Y.
Up there, in there. Up and in
to try and help Key here and refocus to
Jenna's a nurse, so she knows what she's
that's right, you're a nurse. Go ahead, Jenna.
Shove that on. No, I'm just kidding. Just to refocus it so we can move on, because I know it's entirely uncomfortable. That question intrigued me only because even though it seemed like a really stupid, dishonest question, I'm not saying it that it is individually, that just drives the lack of appropriate education for Black young girls that get, which drives to your point, Nikki, of increased abortions in Black women. Because if all they hear, especially for me, I didn't get the sex talk from my parents. Mm-hmm. I first learned about it first through my friends at school and then porn.
My mama locked me in a van at age 10 at my brother's basketball practice. He asked me, do you understand sex? And it was so weird because in my head I knew, I was like, oh God, it goes in there. It goes in there.
You're the lucky few that had that. I didn't.
And then my dad gave me the talk right before I went to college at a Vilo. He was saying basically when you go to college, just be aware. What did he say? Men like anything with a slit. And sex feels good, but you need to wait until marriage. Y'all don't even Jenna's face.
I'm just
I'm like, what's a grocery store?
My
proletariats out there.
Before I went to college, my father just told me, don't bring home any baggage. That was my sex talk from my dad. And from my mother, it was more along the lines of the same thing when I was younger. And I, developed and had menstruated early too. I was 10 years old. That wasn't in the conversation at that time either. Maybe at that time I was still a bit too young. Who knows? I don't really know. Just to help Key, we can transition to something else.
When Amani was in the first grade, I was watching something with Dr. Phil. They were like, no, you need to talk to your kids young, like in grade school. I'm like, why would I talk? Like, that just seems silly. She was 7 years old and I asked her what sex was. And she was like, well, it's when a boy's penis goes into your vagina. And I'm like, holy hell.
She knows how. How is it possible?
I think I might have
known. It was like a second nature. I just knew. I figured. So my parents are very Christian, very heavily Christian. They were very protective, Christian school, private school. So I didn't really have access to all of the things kids do today. I grew up, this was in 96, right? So I didn't really have access to that, but I still knew it went in there. When she asked me, it was weird because she was like, do you know how this works? And I just, in my head, I was like, it goes in there, but I don't like the fact that it does.
It goes right. All he's doing is this. It's in there.
My 10-year-old mind, I was like, how is that possible? Because it's so gross. Then I went to college and it went in there. So you're welcome. When we were in the dorm, all my friends in the dorm on like day damn one, when we moved in, we were like, we're going to stay virgins until marriage. We were counting down. Within 2 weeks, every single person in that room had voided their virginity. So
2 weeks
didn't last. 2 weeks. It took time. We were like, yo,
swag on the men in that school.
Middle Tennessee State University. You want to get fucked? It's gonna happen.
Question.
Let's redirect the conversation.
I know. I'm ready for the test.
Mm-mm.